Today I'm going to tell you all about the legend of Sassi, its origin, how he lost his leg. I'll share some stories about Sassi and also talk about the different races of this creature. Sassi has several different names. He can be called Sassi Perere, Sassi Triki, Sassi Sasura, Matinta Perere, Matinta Pere, and many other names. I don't know exactly what the translation of Sassi Perere would be, but I know it has something to do with the name of a bird, and Perere has something to do with hopping or jumping. Well, let's start here by talking about what a Sassi is. If you're Brazilian, it's very hard for you to have never heard of this creature, whether through Sítio de Pica-Pau Amarelo, through a book, through school, or through your grandfather who said he got into a fight with a Sassi, or that he woke up at night to noises in the stable and when he got there the horses had their manes tied up. Well, more commonly called Sassi Perere, he would be a ghost, a spirit, a guardian of the forests. He is possibly the most well-known creature in Brazilian folklore. And although he is connected to forests and woods, he can also appear in urban areas or in rural regions with many houses. He is usually described as follows: a black boy with only one leg who carries a pipe and wears a red cap. The pipe, called a pito, is said to be very old. He enjoys catching people who don't subscribe, like, or share the video. So go ahead and subscribe, leave a like, share, and hype it up too. If you want to learn more about folklore, check out the pinned comment. Also, join the Discord to hang out with everyone and follow me on Instagram, all right? Continuing. I said that usually Saci appears like this because, as you'll see here in the video, even though Saci was initially more famous in the south of Brazil, he ended up spreading to all kinds of regions, which made the legend also take on new aspects, so to speak. And the form of Saci changed a lot from one account to another. It varies greatly, sometimes giving a distinct impression. According to Camara Cascudo, who will be a major source here, Saci is not a single entity, but a race of creatures. In the video, Saci will be a one-legged boy wearing a red cap and loves to smoke, and his main fun would be tying the manes of animals. And he mostly does this at night. The arrival of Saci can be noticed by an extremely bizarre, creepy whistle that sends chills down your spine. And interestingly, despite being scary, Saci could also help you by giving you a little money. And just like other creatures from folklore, Saci cannot cross water. Among the many pranks he loves to play on people, he can dirty the floor of the house, eat the food, burn the food, and turn off the lights, and scare those travelers who are alone on the streets or in the woods. Surprisingly, colonial Brazil chroniclers mention Saci, at least as we know him today, even if only briefly, which suggests that his image as we know it today may have been formed during that time. Because even though there was an indigenous Saci, he is very different from the one we know today. Much of the Saci legend came about because of the people who came here, both Europeans and Africans, and also because of a specific guy who would be Monteiro Lobato. So if no chronicler mentioned this legend, where did the Sassi Perere come from? Well, that's where a bird comes in, or rather, some birds, the Sassi. The first Sassi bird we have would be the Tapera naevia, or however you say its name. The name would mean mother of soul, because this bird was greatly feared by the indigenous people. When they heard its song, they knew that something bad could happen. In other words, for them, the song of the Saci bird was a bad omen. The indigenous people felt immense fear upon hearing its song. This bird would be almost like a demon that keeps tricking travelers who pass through its surroundings, which right away really reminds you of Saci's whistle and also his game of tricking travelers. Curiously, this same bird may also have inspired another legend, which is that of Matinta Pereira, who also announced her arrival with a bizarre whistle. But the name Saci for birds is not limited to just that bird I mentioned. There are also a few others, like the Marquita de Brejo, Alma de Gato, or Alma do Cablo, which are said to have sucked the souls of the dead. This legend isn't exclusive to Brazil. In Argentina, there's a bird called crispim, which is said to be the Yesi yatere. Despite the very similar name, Saci Perere is actually quite different. The Yesi Yatere is part of the legend of the 7 legendary monsters, who would be the son of Karana and a nap god. In other words, a god of afternoon naps. I even have a video on this legend if you're interested. There's even a legend about the origin of these birds that have a bizarre song. One of them says that 2 boys were taken far away from their village by their uncle. An uncle who disliked them killed the 2. They returned as spirits and spoke to their grandmother in the village. And they warned her that every time she heard a strange whistle, she should leave and go far away, that something very bad would happen. Due to the boy's whistle, they spotted 2 birds with a peculiar song. Okay, but for this, there's a difference, right? According to Kamara Cascudo, this transformation occurred due to a mix-up with the names, mainly with the legend of Matinta Pereira, who was a being that turned into a bird and devoured people's souls. But at that time, Matinta Pereira was called Matita Pere. And in the south, the same legend ended up being called Sasita Perere. And that same bird used to play tricks on people, just like Saci does nowadays. However, the name Saci Teperere ended up getting several other names because people didn't exactly understand how the locals spoke. So it ended up becoming Saci Perere, Saci Treek, Saci whatever. Look at that. While Saci is absent from old colonial Brazil chronicles and northern Brazil folklore, he will inevitably have a substitute. Barbosa Rodriguez writes in Poronduba Amazonense, page 13. In the south, it's Saci Taperere, in the center Kaipora, and in the north, Mati Tapere. The civilized man, who often doesn't understand the pronunciation of the countryman, who is the one most pursued by him on his journeys, has changed his name. He has already called him Saci Prere, Sapere, Serere, Siriri, Mati Tapere, and even other Portuguese names like Mati Taperera, which later might become Da Silva or Dama. To achieve his goals and perform his feats without being seen, Saci or Miti almost always lives transformed into a bird, which gives itself away by its song, whose melancholic notes are sometimes deep and sometimes high-pitched. They deceive the traveler who cannot discover its resting place, because when he tries to find it by the deep notes, which seem to indicate that Saci is nearby, or by the high notes that make him seem far away, he is tricked by the song and gets lost, led astray, never seeing the creature. One very interesting thing that's good to tell you is that both Matinta Pereira and Saci, originally, they were always spirits. In other words, they were never people who, because of something that happened in their lives, ended up becoming a creature or a spirit. Saci has always been a being that would end up bothering people, and Matinta has always been a bird that would steal people's souls. But over time, both legends changed. Matinta Pere became extremely powerful shamans who would transform into birds and go seek revenge on their enemies. Meanwhile, Saci became the companion of a being called Capera, and Saci took the form of a bird with only 1 leg. Is that the Saci we know? No, we'll get there. This form of Saci that we know today is actually the result of a mix of cultures over time. The Saci Perere, who lived in the south of Brazil, he ended up moving to other regions, mixing with already well-known legends. He incorporated legends from Brazil and abroad like Curupira, adopting the idea that when someone threw a knot at him, if someone threw a tied piece of cloth at him, he would untie it. And also the idea of him bothering travelers and everything else was something exclusive to Curupira, but it ended up being passed on to the new Saci as well. He picked up the idea of counting fallen grains from European legends. From Kaipora, he would have gotten the whistle, tornado, and the notion of disturbing animals, delaying business and also preventing smoking. Tying the mane and also riding horses would have also come from Kaipora. We don't really know exactly where Saci's single leg came from, but they say it may have been inspired by various cultures. For example, in the Mayan religion, Mayan mythology, where there is the god Huracan, who has 1 leg and also ends up creating the tornado. There's the Gulucho from Bahian folklore. But the idea is that it would have come from the Ceopods, who were dwarves with only 1 leg and a huge foot. And this leg of the Ceopod and also of the original Saci would be in the center of the body. So both the Ceopods and Saci never originally had 2 legs. They always had just 1. The connection with money, the red cap, and the holes in the hands comes from the Portuguese, from the Trasgo. The Trasgo or Trasgos is a mythological creature present in various cultures in northern Spain, but especially in the traditional culture of Asturias and Cantabria, and is also found in Portuguese legends. He is a household goblin who is considered mischievous and nervous. He is often depicted as a tiny man who limps on his right leg and has dark skin, wears red clothes and a pointed red hat. He has a hole in his left hand and is sometimes described as having horns. He has a tail, ram's ears, long legs, and wears a long black and gray cloak. At other times, he is described as small with long, thin legs and wearing a tight, dark brown dress. One of the ways to get rid of the Trasmo is to ask him to count some grains and hold them in his hands. Due to a hole in his left hand, he struggles to complete the task, taking a long time before disappearing out of embarrassment for not finishing. Well, in the case of Saci's red cap, they also say that if you manage to take it off, you can control him. And if you throw a sieve over a whirlwind, you might be able to catch a Saci too. And under the influence of Africans, Saci became a black boy who was no longer a forest spirit, but a slave who got trapped and tore off one of his legs, or who lost it in a capoeira fight. But there's also the version that says he was born from a bamboo, and that at the end of his life, Saci turns into a shelf fungus. Well, even with this established image, Saci Perere spread throughout Brazil and gained many different forms and many different names. And many of these stories were included by Monteiro Lobato in his book O Saci Perere, Result of an Inquiry, where he gathers several accounts of Saci stories. And from this book came the so-called Saci races, or types of Saci. Well, if you've ever researched a little about the history of Saci, you must have ended up somewhere, some source, be it a book, video, or whatever, that talks about the types or races of Saci. Basically, everywhere always talks about two main races. I mean, not two, three main races. Which would be Saci Pererche, the common one we know, who wears a red cap, smokes a pipe, and has the power to make a whirlwind appear. There's Saci Trick, who gets his name from the sound he makes while walking through the woods, or also, he plays tricks by sneaking into houses, eating food, and messing with dogs, chickens, and cats. He makes people's lives miserable. There's also Saci Sasuraki, the common one with red eyes. Aside from these three, there are several others, including Saci Separe, Saci Terere, Saci Seriri, and Saci. From Poa, there's Saci Balfera and others, including Saci with a monkey face and Saci that's a tiny bat that sucks animal blood. On the farms, there's Saci with two legs, there's Saci that even looks like a werewolf, a headless mule. Anyway, there are many different types, but maybe the most interesting one, for me, it's the Tibungi, which is the Saci from Minas Gerais, who has only one leg, but his main difference from the others is that he has an arrow in the middle of his head that shoots fire, and he also kidnaps people, being a kind of boogeyman. But except for the Tibungi, for me, all the other Sacis are just one Saci, just seen in different ways. They're called different names based on the region where the legend originates, similar to many Brazilian legends. Brazil's vast size leads to significant variations in legends across regions, affecting the creature's name, appearance, and the legend's narration. So for me, these types of Saci don't make much sense. To me, they're not really true, but that's just my own opinion. Of course, I'm going to bring you some accounts collected by Monteiro Lobato himself, so you can draw your own conclusions. Born in rural Rio, I've heard about Saci Perere since childhood. It was once described to me as a small jet-black creature that could be either a man or an animal. His eyes are bright and sparkling, matching his quick movements. He has a long, upturned nose. The mouth looks more like a cave with a red bottom, and when it opens, it shows 2 rows of horrible teeth, sharp as razors. His hair and mustache are so stiff they resemble wire. He has only one leg and is seen from afar, resembling a street boy, like those you find in large numbers on the roads and farms. They also say that his touch, besides being disgusting, poses a danger of burning anyone who falls into his claws. The most effective way to drive him away, according to the people from Fluminense, is to call out to the Virgin Mary 3 times, whom he greatly fears. I heard the following story from an old black man which left me terrified. When, in the dead of night, I seemed to hear the voice of Saci, who said, "Saci Perere, my leg hurts so much, doesn't it?" "The tale goes like this," he began. giving his voice an eerie tone typical of those from the backlands. I was coming from the house of a compadre whose wife had died. The night was gloomy, a moonless winter night. A cold wind howled with a muffled moan, making the tall trees along the roadside sway, which looked more like ghosts waving their arms in the air. The sight that unfolded before my eyes was terrifying. At the stroke of midnight, I heard in the distance, far, far away, the voice of Saci Pere, accompanied by the ominous hoot of an owl perched in the nearby cemetery. The beast I was riding, its ears pricking up, suddenly stopped, seized by great panic. I was so afraid that I even lost my voice, unable to even scream. And, without the strength to draw my pistol, to shoot that damn brat who seemed to come straight from the depths of hell, when these horrors were being told in that place, everyone crossed themselves. And I, all scared, grabbed onto my mother's skirt. And I was no more than 7 years old. Well, then he continued. His voice became clearer and clearer, until at a bend in the road, 2 fiery eyes appeared. It was Saci. Faced with danger, I regained my courage and called out to Maria 3 times. That was like pouring cold water on boiling water. Saci disappeared and ran off, vanishing behind the white wall of the cemetery. The beast then, taking advantage of the moment, bolted madly toward the city, where it dropped dead from exhaustion. Since that day, I never again passed by the cemetery at night. Then, after hearing the story, my mother took me home to sleep. I had a restless dream and saw the story told by Uncle Damio in my dream. Good morning. Here in the outskirts of Policia, where I've been wandering ever since I was expelled from the city because of the fairy tales and the brewer dwarves from the nebulous Germania, I heard that Estadinho was going to publish my portrait and write my biography. I wanted to see the commotion, so I grabbed the Chan-Chun coins I'd been saving in the hollow of a rotten log since the time Don Pedro turned into a jaguar at Iparanga and bought your newspaper. I liked a bit of what it said in the first issue, but I was exiled along with the portrait. It didn't look anything like me. It looked more like Manuel Lopez than me. Later, I read other little articles that talked about me, and I got even more upset about it, because it was just insults against me. They called me a one-legged black man, evil, ugly. They told stories about my mischief in Minas and Rio de Janeiro. About my life in São Paulo, I never spoke a word. However, I always lived respectfully, in Policeia, because if I still remember, and with longing, it's for the good friendships I made there. Back in those days, around the penultimate decade of the last century, I enjoyed many good conversations with my esteemed friend Emilio Pestana at the commercial office on Rosario Street. I frequently warmed myself by the fire at the old editor's house. Of the province, reading behind the old jail, listening to the cook tell the children about my tricks. How many times? Pepe knows this well. Ask him if it isn't true. But let's get back to the things they told me. I'm neither black nor a goat, a true son of a caboclo woman. I've remained a caboclo in São Paulo, and that's why, not because I'm a bad person, I haven't gone to heaven yet. As they say, caboclo doesn't go to heaven even if he prays. Caboclo has tough hair, pokes our Lord. I'm bow-legged and walk with my heels forward, so my footprints point in the opposite direction from where I'm going. Less of a bad thing, that's actually a good thing, because humanity always straying from the right path has a chance to change direction by following my tracks. Also, in São Paulo, I'm not Saci Pereri, I'm called Saci Saperi, and according to my tricks, people nickname me Saci Treek and Saci Mofera. I was reading your little newspaper, the story of Saci Saperi, and you asked for information about Tarchinho. Sorry for speaking in our country folk language, because I never went to school, but I learned to murder my own name. Here in our neck of the woods, there are a lot of those little guys. It's true, he exists, and sometimes he even shows up to us. I myself, when I was younger, saw one of those little guys, and I was weeding some beans we had planted at the edge of an old road that led to the house of a pig farmer named Tarjoaquim, when, out of nowhere, I heard a little noise, like the rustling of a woman's skirt. So right at the edge of the path, I stared hard at the little noise, and something formed that we call a whirlwind. Right in the middle of the road, it lifted the leaves and grass into the air. After we got closer to that thing, I saw with my own eyes a little black boy with a red cap with only one leg and eyes like burning coals. laughing a lot and jumping from one side to the other, clapping his hands. And he has a little way of skipping, just like that. So my hair stood on end, just like pig bristles. I remembered that my mother used to tell us that she had once run into a little devil like that. That rascal, the devil, jumped on top of my mare, which was grazing by the side of the road, and twisted the mane of the blessed mare, made it like a stirrup, and made the mare take off in a skid like a lamb. The mare took off down the road toward home to see if she could get away from that little devil. As for me, I ended up behind the pasture at home. There I saw that darn whirlwind again, which stayed under my feet and almost threw me up in the air. The darn thing let out a laugh in my ear and disappeared. The mare was in the yard at home, really calm, and her mane was so tangled that we even had to cut it. Every little color you mention and tell us about, he shows up. The elders say that mentioning Saci is like threads of wind. He only wants to play and has never harmed anyone, but it's true that he exists. If you've watched this far, please like the video, subscribe, share, and hype it up. It's really important. Don't forget to comment as well if you want more videos like this about more Brazilian legends.